Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to this edition of Afternoons with an Author. And I'm delighted that I have my very dear friend, Air Commodore Nitin Sathe, with us on this discussion of this absolutely wonderful book, War Stories, on behalf of the Value of Words and the National Digital Library of India, and on behalf of all our partners, Royal Post, Fair Observer, Technopack, Green Panel, Coal India, ONGC, and the Government of Uttarakhand. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this edition. Friends, before we start the program, let me tell you that Air Commodore Nitin Sathe had received the first VoW award for non-fiction for his brilliant book called Born to Fly, which showed that power is in the mind. Power is in the mind. It's in the mind that we do everything and we create everything. So congratulations, Commodore Sathe. Your journey of writing has continued, and
Thank you.
you've become a very prolific writer, and you're going to give a run to the professional writers for their money. So I'm
Ah,
very proud of you. Very glad. Friends, our interlocutor for today, Ira Chauhan, could not join us because the mother is not well. So we are wishing her mother the best of health. So we'll start without much ado. I'll start by first asking Nitin on why he decided to write this book and why he decided to write this book at this particular juncture.
okay, sir. It was the 50th year of the 71 war in 21 when I was writing an article about my father actually. My father was in the Mukti Bahini. He was in the army and he went into Pakistan somewhere in May of 1971. He dressed up as as a Bengali in lungi and he had grown a beard and he went in a truck laden with normal saman that goes into Bangladesh. So he went in the truck and then he took his guns along bit by bit, and they were helping out the Mukti Bahini there. And he used to tell me a few stories about his life in the jungles of Bangladesh and very fascinating stories he used to tell us. So I started recounting those and I was writing them down when I got a request from rediff.com that if I could do a series of 71 articles for them.
Mhm.
So I said, okay. So I now started contacting my dad's friends and their friends and created a whole lot of, contacts to ask people about little known facts about the war of 1971. As I was doing it, I came to my mind that let's do a little bit of Kargil too, because the Kargil veterans are still younger, and I knew a whole lot of them personally. So I decided to do this also, and then decided to weave all these stories into a book. So that's how this journey began in 2021, sometime in the middle of 2021, and I got the book out just a few days ago, of course, at the VoW Festival.
You see, friends, for all the listeners, the book is so interesting because it's both empirical and anecdotal. Empirical because all it has is facts, anecdotal because it has a lot of recall. And in fact, can you tell them the story of what happened when the telegram came on your sister's birthday and there was abundant confusion in the house because, so I think it's better to listen from you. And I don't know where Nilima is today. I mean, maybe she's also watching this
Yeah,
program.
I think
But it
they
was
should be watching.
fascinating to listen to this story. So why don't you tell our readers on what
Okay.
happened about the sudden telegram, which you tell us about what happened with that telegram.
Okay, okay. So Telegram in war was the harbinger of bad news generally, and it was the 19th of December, and 20th was my dad's birthday, 19th was my sister Nilima's birthday, and we just celebrated that, and we were at home, and there was blackout times, couldn't go out much. You were sitting inside, and the siren used to go off intermittently once in a while, and we used to all rush and hide under under the bed or in some
With
corner.
your
That,
toy pistol, and to think that you
yeah,
can.
and I used
Yeah.
to play with my toy pistol under that. So this guy landed up at home, and the bell rang in the sometime in the late evening, and we were wondering who it is. So the door was open, and there was this guy in his khakis and his, in a side cap, tilted to one side, oldish looking gentleman. I still remember his face so many years down the line. And he says telegram.
Hmm.
And my mother looked at him and she froze and she just sank where she was standing. Because just a few days before that, there was we called him Kulkarni uncle, who had died. In fact, after the secession of war, he had died in a mine blast in Bangladesh. And the telegram had arrived uh, telling the family about his death. So mom went down, and then we didn't know what to do. We didn't understand what was happening. So after a few minutes of who will open the telegram, finally the postman, he said, "Okay, let me open it and read it out to you." So he read it out, and it was "Happy Birthday, Nilima" from my dad, and he had just landed up in Calcutta on the 20th, and the first thing that he did was he came from Dhaka, went to the post office and sent this telegram for her birthday, because he never missed her birthday till then. He used to always be there for her birthday. So it was a pleasant. Finally, it ended up as a pleasant surprise, of course.
So this is actually, of course, these days there are no telegrams, but it's such a interesting, recall of something. How, I mean, it can just take us back to the memories of 1971, the kind of, the kind of distress one felt when a telegram arrived, and that also links us to yet another book on, two or three books on Bangladesh, which are called the blood telegrams, because the consul general for America in Dhaka was a gentleman named Blood, and he had sent a series of telegrams to Kasinga, outlining how bad the conditions were, laid down very clearly that the policy which the US is following is not very good. So, in fact, when I saw telegram, I thought it's something to do with the
With
with the
that
blood
telegram.
telegram. Okay, so each of the chapters in this lovely book is about an individual, is about an exceptional individual who's played an exceptional role in the war. So as we go along, I'll now ask him to tell us about Brigadier Kharpure. And it's very interesting. So let's understand from you about his mission, his contribution to the war.
Okay. Well, Brigadier Kharpure was on the western sector. He was in the western sectors, just the Longo, just north of Longowala, actually, somewhere Bikaner, down a little south of Bikaner, and they had moved from Devlali in special train, and they did not know where they were going. He was from the air defense artillery, and he was a dear friend of my dad. Actually, he was the first one.
He's the same gentleman we met at the MHS session in Delhi, right?
No, he didn't turn up.
He,
No, no,
he
no, no,
didn't
no.
turn up. There was another person from the air defense who was there.
That was Lieutenant General. That was the Lieutenant General. We talked. That's the
Okay.
last story in the 71
Okay.
section, where he
Right.
drops
Right.
the letter.
Hmm.
Remember that? Hmm.
Hmm.
So Kharpure uncle, as we called him, was the air defense man, and they moved to the western sector. And his area of operations, there was nothing much happening actually. So they had gone about 40 kilometers inside Pakistan, and they had deployed their guns, air defense guns there. And he gave me very little stories about his driving in a jeep. He used to drive along the railway line, on the railway line along that, because that is a hardened patch available in the desert. So he used to drive along that and go up and down from the border till 40 kilometers inside. So he gave me little stories about what used to happen. So during the war, what he told me was that his driver was he didn't allow his driver to drive when he was in the vehicle. So he was driving, and his driver was sitting alongside him, and a rocket
Yes.
attack by the Pakistani aircraft Rocket just went clean through this fellow and went through the jeep, making a hole in the jeep, and didn't explode. Thankfully, otherwise both would have been dead. The driver died on the spot, and they had to give him a in situ burial. So when I asked him about the in situ burial, then he said that in war there is no time for picking up bodies and taking them as far as possible. We try and send them back, but the body in what condition it was in, he says that it was good that we gave him a decent burial on site itself, and then they moved on. And of course, he told he talked about the families. This was a very interesting part about the
Yes, yes.
family
I
that
mean,
he spoke.
his wife
The
was in the
families
labor
were in
of saying,
Bengali. They didn't have money. The paychecks were not coming in for some reason. In
yes,
those times, you had to sign every time, every month. You had to sign on a piece of paper, and then the check would come into your account. So the ladies were down to zero in money, and they didn't for buying the everyday needs. They didn't have enough money. So his wife went around and went to the
post
bank
office,
manager
bank got
to the bank
19,000
manager,
rupees.
and she
Yes,
requested him. So he told her that you only got 4,000 rupees or something in your bank. What can I give you? So she said, no, no, I require 19, 20,000 bucks. So he was very kind, and he did an overdrawal without any interest, gave her the money, and then in the evening she carried out a distribution of pay, if I may call it, to all the ladies. They all stood there and they put their thumb impressions, and she gave them 200 rupees each. And of course, the money was recovered much later when the war finished. Tharpure sir, he sent some money to the bank so that the bank manager won't get into trouble. So, and then there was a baby born. That was a very touching story though he spoke about.
yes, yes,
There was this baby being born. I mean, one lady was pregnant and she was moved to hospital, and that was his driver's wife actually. So he wanted to send the driver back on leave to see his firstborn, and it was the body that arrived later, and the boy was born after he was dead. The lady was not told till the time the boy was born, actually. But a very, very touching story that he told me about what happens in the rare. We call
yes.
rare in the sense what happens
No, no, I
at.
think it's very important because we often these stories are all about gallantry, all about all these things, but then there is I mean, the families, I mean, the pressure that they are under, the dilemmas and the
Yeah,
difficulties which they face. Because we are already in the Western sector, why don't you tell us there was this officer who was a POW, but the POW turned out to be from Patiala, happened to
yeah.
be with the same
Oh,
coach,
that is
Patodi. So, I mean, tell us about this story, which shows that war, no war, there is something known as a human connect. I
absolutely.
wonder if this human connect would survive now because you see, in 71 by 71, everybody would have had a common, culture, I mean, a common
There is a
reference
linkage.
point. I don't think it can happen today because, I mean, we have not, our class fellows are not in the Pakistan Army, our class fellows are not in the Pakistan Civil Service. But way back in 71,
There was,
there were a lot of people who would have trained together, who may have been in the RIMC together, who may have
yeah,
been in various colleges together. So this is a fascinating story because you're already on the Western Front. So you might as
yeah.
well tell the story of this desert and going up and down the camel and the POW rides and all these things.
So in fact, before we just I answer that question, you said about the human angle, the humane angles. So I actually wanted to write about this part of it because a lot of things have been written about where which unit was, where it attacked, what happened. So those war diaries have already been opened out and threadbare and analyzed and written about. So I said let's get into a little more human touch and these kind of stories. So. Air Commodore Jail Bhargava, now Air Commodore retired. In fact, I had a drink with him 2 days ago over here in Mohali. Amazing character, still bouncy and still a lot of josh in him. So he was doing his first sortie on the 5th of December 1971 with a guy called Joe Bakshi, squad leader Joe Bakshi, who was his flight commander. And incidentally, Joe Bakshi's son and I are classmates. So there's a big link up here. So that's how I actually got to people. You know. So I was doing Joe Bakshi's story when this story came out, so I kind of added them together and made this one. So he got shot on his first sortie inside enemy territory. He got shot near a place called Khokropar, and he landed. He says he landed in the Pakistani side. There is still conjecture whether he actually walked into the Pakistani side later. But be as it may, when he landed down there, the aircraft was burning away, and he decided to. We wear those Pathani
So
suits
what
under.
happened to Joe Bakshi? Joe Bakshi survived in that.
Yeah. Joe Bakshi was the second aircraft. So he also got hit, but his aircraft was smoking. He went back and landed. And he went and told the boss that I don't think this guy survived because he saw him going down and the aircraft going into flames. And he kept orbiting to see the parachute. He didn't see one. So he went back. That's what we do actually. When we are flying in pairs, we try to look. In fact, Kargil, the same thing happened. This guy got shot because of this. When Nachiketa went down, the other guy went to check on him. Right. We're coming back to the story. This guy landed up there, wore his Pathani suit, tried to orientate himself. He thought he was somewhere, but he actually was somewhere else. And he started in the general direction of India. And while he was doing so, he heard some voices, and he thought that they were Pakistanis coming to get him. So he started running into the desert and in Indian directions, he says, in direction of India. And he saw one, it was getting late in the evening, so he saw one trench there. He went inside that 8-foot trench and he went to sleep. And then he was rudely awakened by some civilian chaps who were walking around there. And then they took him and he tried to bluff his way, saying that, he was, Pathaudi's name, Mansoor Ali Khan. So Mansoor Ali Khan was his friend. When they were together in school and they had played together. So the only Muslim name that came to his mind was Mansoor Ali Khan. So he said, I am Captain so-and-so, I'm from Lahore. And from where in Lahore? He said, Mall Road. Mall Road sab jagah hota hai. So he said, Mall Road in Lahore. So these guys kind of looked after him, they put him on a chapo. He was in pain. He was in a lot of pain. And then the Rangers came, and between the Rangers coming and the villagers looking after him, there was a window available for him to scoot. But his timing was wrong. As he was about to do it, the Rangers arrived. And then the interrogation started. They asked him to recite the Kalma. And that was the end of it. He said, sorry, I am so-and-so. I am Jail Bhargava. He gave out his, name, number and all that. So they arrested him, and then then I described.
You mentioned in this that as per the Geneva Convention, he gave out his name and number. So is there some kind of training or some kind of an orientation given that what happens if you're a POW? So
you see,
so all officers and Jawans are told that this is what the Geneva Convention is, and this is what you have to do in case you're caught.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us something about this?
Geneva Convention just says that you have to say your name, your service number, your service rank, name, service number. 5 things you can give out. Your address, and that's it. And one more thing, I think. Just five things you have to give. But you also wear a little metal thing around your neck in a black thread. One piece of metal is there which gives you a number and your name. Suppose you're found dead, they can identify you as a soldier rather than a spy. Basically, if you get caught as a spy, you get different treatment. So they thought he was a spy, whereas he was a down pilot. So he showed them that little ring around his thing. So the Geneva Convention is taught to everybody, and in fact, the pilots they take a test of ours. They can ask us to tell what all will you say when you are interrogated. But then things have changed over the years. Interrogations don't take place in the manner that they used to earlier. We go into 3rd degree, I think, in the first instance, and it really doesn't last very long. Coming back to the story, if you want me to continue the story a little bit,
it's very interesting. So I think the readers would find it interesting because I have read it, but I want. Mm.
So then he describes his journey through the desert on a camel first, and it's a back-breaking journey because he's already had this back injury while ejecting out of the aircraft. So it hurts him more, and wherever he lands up, he gets a tablet to eat so that his pain is kind of controlled. And they go through the desert to various places, long journey. They finally land up in Karachi after many days. So from the camel they move on to the jeep, and then by aircraft. Finally they move by aircraft, three of them, and they were taken there. All this while they were on the camel and all, till the time he is not handed over to the Air Force authorities, they treat him as a spy, and they keep telling him that we'll shoot you. So this entire story takes you through the entire the rigmarole of getting caught inside enemy territory and what all happened with him. So he writes a letter also to his wife and quietly hands it over to a villager who tells him,
Yeah.
I go across many times, I'll take it for your wife and all. So it never gets delivered, of course. And what was the other thing you asked? I'm sorry, I'm
No,
going
the
off.
other thing was, you see, that how the Patiala connection came about.
Ah, that
That is
Patiala.
how he got his saving. No?
Oh,
उसी
yeah.
से तो, I
So
mean,
this statement,
if he was not from Patiala, I mean, fortunately he was from Patiala. Had he been from maybe say some other place, then maybe treatment would have been different. Mm.
so while he landed up at one of the nights, he landed up in one of the bunkers, and there was this brigadier there, and a number of officers who were there who wanted to see everybody wants to see a POW. When I saw a guy spy when he was caught the first time, I was wanting to go and speak to him and ask him, how did he get caught and what happened next. So everybody was interested. So the entire unit officers were inside that bunker, and it was well inside Pakistan, of course. And so this brigadier starts asking him questions about where is he from and all that. So when he says that I'm from Patiala, he says I'm also from Patiala. And then he says, "Oh, in Patiala, I learned cricket from so and so." It was his coach. So he says he was my coach too. I also played Ranji Trophy for the services. So this gentleman, they kind of a bond is established, a family connection is established between two rivals, if I may call it. And then after that, they become soft on him. They give him a Dunlop mattress to sleep on.
Yes, yes, yes.
They treat him pretty nicely, and then they take him away. So I mean, everybody is not out to kill you, or when once you're a POW. And the stories that we hear are that every POW is treated very badly on the other side and very nicely on our side. It is not so. It's a mix of things.
Hmm. So you have offered this veteran to help him write his biography about his
Yeah.
time in prison in Pakistan. I'm sure that he has a whole stack of stories ready for our consumption. Hopefully, I've landed myself with another project thanks to this story. We had value of words. Wish you the best of luck with this. No,
Yeah.
great.
Thank
I
you.
wonder if you read about Mr. Jaffna's prison diaries in Pakistan. Uh, he was
No,
also
no
okay.
idea.
That's
But
all
I
because
have spoken to the other pilots who were caught behind enemy lines and they escaped from Pakistan. Wala.
it's very interesting. Okay, so in fact, there's a whole set of literature on POWs and on the way, and there's also a book on there are still some POWs who are still languishing in Pakistan jails, which is
Yeah.
something which I think even through this forum we would like to impress upon the government of India that it's something that we ought to be paying attention to. Now, there is a gentleman, who did not want his name to be acknowledged anywhere, but I think we'll take liberties. And I must ask you about Unni Kartha. I don't know his rank, but you must tell us about Unni Kartha, and also about, because you mentioned that he had such a phenomenal understanding of history, and then he still doesn't want his name to come out. So, something about him. It'll be fascinating to hear from you.
So Uni sir and I go back. He was the senior squad leader when we came into the squadron, and we were attack helicopter pilots. So he was one of those epitome of, he was our guru, and we
Okay.
looked up to him for all the training that he gave us, and his knowledge was phenomenal. His knowledge was phenomenal, and he used to tell us about everything, including flying, including stories about war, everything. Here he was all in one, all in one. Amazing character. And he was fired up all the time. that Pakistan, yeah, we must try to kill them all times. No, all the time. That Josh used to keep giving us. Because helicopters basically are very docile, dormant machines generally. And we were in attack helicopters. We were supposed to be, kind of charged up to kill the other guy on the other side. So, and it was the first fighter helicopter squadron that was coming up in the Air Force that time. So, he used to pump people up that way. So Uni sir retired and he became a historian of sorts. And he, if
Any
you go
books?
to his,
Any published books by him? Any
he's
published books
writing
by him?
one. He's writing one on the helicopter operations in the east, the
Okay.
crossing that I've talked about, the Meghna crossing, and the
Hmm.
gentleman who came for the show, who was the flight commander during the operations. So that gentleman and he are writing a book together, and I think they have almost done with it. So they are giving us much more detailed, look into what went, how the Sagat Singh wala thing that I have
Yeah.
written
No,
about.
because I think the specific story of the helicopters has not been covered in very great detail. I mean, the Air Force has its stories, and the Army has its stories, and the Navy has its stories. And I think
Yeah,
you've done a human service. Another point which I think we must share with our readers is about the person who discovered the telegraph and is not very well known. I'm referring to William Shaughnessy, right? William
Rogness, yeah,
Shaughnessy.
yeah. This
So tell us
came,
about him, and about how how the telegraph line spread around, and and ultimately it was that particular telegraph line which led to the telegram, which
yeah.
which led to such a lot of confusion in your family. Mm.
Yeah. So these uh, he go when he was telling me the story about how the first 40 people came across from East Pakistan, and they were all top of the line. That like squadron Wing Commander Khonkar, who came across, was the chief of the Pakistan Air Force Academy, who had come across, and then of course there were many more government servants from East Pakistan who came across. So they formed the core of the Bangladesh government in exile over there. So while he was telling me this story, he went into details of where they were staying. So they were staying in a place called Rani Kutir in Calcutta, in Tollygunge. And this is where the today also the I think the BSNL or one of these government this thing is located in the same building. So in those times it was the signals. I think the army signals were manning this particular place, and this was where these 40 guys were kept. So that's how he went into the story, and he goes into William O. Shaughnessy, the inventor. He was a chemist, and he told me that this guy used to make batteries using clay pots in those
Mhm.
times. He used to sell batteries, in clay pots. Um, so he was the first one to demonstrate the use of a telegraph between, he says, two places. I have to read it out because I don't remember the names. Yeah, Diamond Point
Page
and
37.
Prince of Cards, that in
Yeah.
1851. So he's gone back into history actually almost 100 years plus. He's gone back
Mhm.
into history when he tells the story
No,
about
no,
how the
actually, this is
telegraph.
the remarkable part about writing literature. It is these interesting factlets, which make
Yeah,
the whole thing so interesting. Okay,
yeah.
now on to more
Right.
more serious about what I would say a far more significant thing. You talked about the birth of the Bangladesh Air Force.
Yes.
How the BAF came into being, and I think it's a very fascinating story on how some pilots from India, some helicopter pilots from India actually created or helped create a new force. So let's hear the story of the Bangladesh Air Force from Nitin.
Right. So there were these Air Force pilots who were flying in the East Pakistan part of the Pakistan Air Force. They were flying in then East Pakistan, and they decided to melt it back into India. And they were the ones who actually came across and uh, handed themselves over to us. So that is the time when we decided to start training these pilots to fly our aircraft. So there was a Boeing. I think there was a propeller aircraft pilot, and there was a fighter pilot, and there was no helicopter pilot which came across. but they had to be converted onto helicopters. Sorry. So
Mhm.
this task was given to the Indian Air Force, and one pilot, AVM Singla, he's now I think 85 plus. Then he was a flight lieutenant. He was told to take one helicopter down to the Far East from he was in Bagdogra, and he flew this aircraft to Kumbigram, that is Silchar. And from Silchar, they went forward, and these guys who had come across, they met. So 28th of September, if I remember right, was the date that they started training these young guys. So the training includes ground subjects. So this one man had to
Oh
explain the
yes,
aircraft to them first, then they teach them flying. And flying, coming from being a pilot, I'll tell you that flying a fixed wing aircraft is completely different as compared to a helicopter. If you all the habits that you kind of learn when you're flying a fighter or a Boeing or whatever, you have to just disregard them and come when you come to helicopter. Because helicopter is different to fly. So these guys had to and they were already old enough people. So to teach them at that stage was, and there was no time. The time was running out. So he was
yes.
given
I
a
mean, you mentioned how the Kohima airfield and all these other, distant airfields. That is where the sort of got. But now let's move on to this. And these were the three pilots who later on
Yeah,
made
so
the
these were
Bangladesh.
so the training. I have explained how they trained them on the Chetak,
Yes.
and then on the Chetak helicopter they managed to fit in a gun and they managed to fit in some rockets from a fighter aircraft. It was all jugaad, and it
Hmm.
worked. Best thing is that
Hmm.
our guys made it well, and it worked the first time it went and fired from the aeroplane. The Chetak was not meant to ever fire a rocket. And to fit
Hmm.
a rocket onto a helicopter will take years of research and years of R&D.
Hmm.
But they did it overnight, and
I like the term that you used. The Jugaad technology
yeah,
was really very very effective.
yes,
We have this. You brought in this chapter called the Rajput Cavalier, when you're talking about Air Vice Marshal Chandan Singh. I mean, the son
yes,
of a legendary hero. And in this chapter, you discuss about the great collaboration of the army helicopters with General Sagat Singh, and how it led to. I mean, how it made it possible to lift so many troops. This is also something which has been discussed by General Ian Cardozo in his book
yeah.
1971. He's mentioned that also. So tell us more about this.
If it hadn't been for Sagat Singh, General Sagat Singh, and this gentleman, um, we wouldn't have finished the war off in 13 days. That is for sure, because whatever I have read about both these guys, 4 Corps was never meant to go to Dhaka. Dhaka was never on the cards for anybody. Or,
Mhm.
that the race of the
Yeah,
generals
even
is
even General
completely
Cardozo says the same
yeah,
thing. Yes.
yeah. So it was never on the plans, but General Sagat had thought about this much before the war started. He had asked the Air Force element, that was Chandan Singh, to start training for it. And
Mhm.
Chandan Singh did not wait for any. He was the boss of Jorat then, and he was given complete command and control to do whatever he wanted to do with helicopter and transport operations. So these two guys met, he gave him this idea. So he says, "I want to take troops across the. We will get into trouble when you get into Bangladesh from the south, and when you have to turn towards Dhaka, we'll have to cross the Meghna. So Meghna from the west to the east towards Dhaka, they had to cross south and west rather. So they said we'll use a air bridge, if I may call it air bridge, to put these troops across. So I think 4-5 GR was the first. Gurkha Rifles was the first unit that
Yes.
was airlifted across the Meghna River. And for this, initially they were training in daytime, and these operations had never ever been carried out by night by the pilots. So they have to now train at night, be ready for night operations. And the first time they have flown from unlit helipads, there was no lighting on the helipads. They've gone into Pakistan 30, 40, 50 kilometers flying inside enemy territory and landed these troops and guns and ammunition, what have you, and come back. So even to practice offloading was required. You can't spend time on ground inside enemy territory. You got to land within a few 1 minute, 2 minutes maximum we give them for heavy loads. Men and all, we give them a few seconds. Moment the aircraft wheel is touching down, they are already
Absolutely.
jumping out. So this whole story, when he told me about how they practiced for it first, and then how this entire airlift was done. Me 4, the helicopter that was there in those times, was not such a reliable machine. It was a piston engine, old-fashioned Russian helicopter, sputtering smoke all the time, oil leaks, the works,
Oil
and
leaks. God.
they
Okay.
it used to leak oil from every corner of the aeroplane. It was quite a thing to fly. And so the Me 4s, they were maintained. 14 of them were maintained serviceable through the war. And all these pilots, the young pilots, flying officers, and all, first chance they were getting to, fly these missions. And so it was in fact, quite a large part of this stories that I've written are related to this particular operation. About it was in phases. I've talked about the phase 1, phase 2, and
Mm.
phase 3 of operation when they kept shifting from north to south and kept putting troops across. So it was a record of sorts. From Second World War also, nobody had done this kind of a major airlift of men and material. Of course, the famous Tangayal
And
drop
so
at
unexpected. And so unexpected. I mean, that is the element of surprise because sometimes you anticipate certain things and sometimes you don't. And that is what now I want to take you fast forward to the surrender ceremony
oh
and
yes,
about what General Niazi did and not say because as you mentioned that he was too shocked to say anything, but he
yeah,
did go to an Air Force officer and did something. So you tell us in your words
yeah.
what it
So
was. Because as an Air Force officer, you must be feeling very proud of it. You
of
must be
course,
feeling very proud of it. That
and
here is a general from the other side who acknowledges that they won or lost. I mean, they lost the war not because of the. I mean, of course, the Indian Army was very brave, but because of the logistics and the other support provided by the. We would like to hear the story in your
in
in
fact,
your
in fact,
words.
this story was given to me by Sajjan Singh, he was son of the
Yes, you
MI.
mentioned that. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So the story, he tells me that when they all went for the surrender ceremony, there's a different chapter actually about the surrender ceremony which I've written separately, how they
Hmm.
went and what happened there in the streets of Dhaka. But this particular aspect, which he told me, was very interesting. That while they were all at the surrender ceremony, somebody asks the General Niazi, who was not speaking anything. Obviously, a general who's laid down his arms would be no mood to speak anything. So he says, "How did you just give up so easily?" So he pointed towards Chandan's wing on his uniform on the wing. Now, what Sachin says is, he mean my father or did he mean the Air Force? Either way, it is good. I mean, he says that both. I would rather say that it was my father because of which he lost the war. So that's how he puts it across to me in the book, in his
Tell
talk
us
to me.
also about the surrender ceremony. That was also, I mean, very few surrender ceremonies have been so well photographed, so well documented, and find a place in so many museums and things. And you
Yeah,
learn a lot from these, from these things. So you find people smoking in that ceremony and things.
yeah.
So it also shows how common smoking was and air of celebration and so many things. So you tell us about the surrender ceremony.
So the surrender ceremony was 16th evening at Dhaka at the Polo Grounds. About it was 15-20 minutes drive from the airport. So there were these 6 or 8, I think it was 8 aircraft which went with all the Indian officials and everybody. And the army which was already in there had prepared the tables and laid them out. And General Niazi and his troops. There was a formal laying down of arms. In fact, I've got a photograph from my father at the laying down of arms ceremony.
Do you have
Which
it? Can you display it?
sorry, it's on a PPT. I'll have to look for it. I'll see if I can find one.
Okay.
Um, so so this ceremony was going to happen, and everybody was standing around. General Aurora, the Eastern Army commander. Then of course we had the Air Force boss, the naval boss, All the senior officers were there from Shillong, from Calcutta, and of course journalists and the works. Everybody was there, and all these young pilots who had taken part in the war. They all wanted to go there. So General Sagat had promised them that we'll have a party at Dhaka Intercontinental Hotel. That was the only hotel, by the way, which was left by the Indian Air Force. They didn't bomb it because all the journalists and everybody was living in that. My father also lived in that, in fact, for a few days before he came out of Dhaka. So Dhaka International Hotel, they wanted to celebrate 1971 New Year's, 72 New Year's, that is 31st December. So he says, boys, if you do well, we will meet in Dhaka on 31st December for a party. So all these boys had gone there and he got them together and he spoke to them and, gave them a slap on the back and said, well done, and now we'll meet on that date. He gave the formal invitation to them to come for the party. And some of them went, by the way, to Dhaka to for the party later. So when on 16 December, when they were around the table, there was a guy called Wing Commander Krishnamurthy, that time flying officer Krishnamurthy. He lives in Bombay, and a very, very nice gentleman. I met him a number of times. And he managed to barge his way through at the table when that famous photograph was taken. There's one flying officer, little young chap, who was speaking over General Jacob's shoulder. He was trying to push General Jacob away to have a look at what was happening at the table. So that's how he came into the picture. That famous picture that's flashed everywhere. So Krishnamurthy had the privilege of being the youngest guy around when this was.
Yeah.
And in fact, one more story that Krush sir told me was the pen that was supposed to be used by General Niazi refused to write. The ink dried up or whatever happened, nobody knows, but it refused to write. So when he tried to sign, it didn't. So there was a journalist there, Indian journalist, who quickly threw his pen across and said, "Isse karo sign." So finally,
where is that pen? Where is that pen? That pen must be.
This story with the corroboration nahi hai, but this is what he told me. And it was supposed to be the gold tipped, but some expensive pen that was taken, which didn't work. That's what he told me. Now, how much of truth is there? I mean, we can't really just conjectures. But I think if he said it, if he's seen it there, he meant what he saw. I mean, he would have said what he saw. Very interesting story that he told me.
Okay, so I think we spent about 2/3 of our time on 71. We better spend some time on Kargil. So tell me, in terms of sheer technology, what have been the changes in these years in terms of flying technology, in terms of helicopter, in terms of, there must have been a world of difference, right?
Absolutely.
So first of all, let's understand the ecosystem. Because this is a very specific territory now. Kargil is one of the world's most difficult battlefield areas, whereas, of course, every area is difficult. We were dealing with the desert there, and we were dealing with the riverine kind and Bangladesh. So tell us about the topography of Kargil and about the changes in technology that have taken place from 71 and to 99, and then we'll discuss a few of these stories.
So Kargil, by and large, 15,000 feet and above all our posts. I'll go over it very quickly. All posts of ours, 15,000 feet to 18,000 feet, 19,000 feet. And we had about 300 to 400 of them spread across the road, going from along the road rather in the hills, and that was the first line of defense with the Pakistanis. Sorry. So these guys we used to come back in winters and go back in summers. That was the unwritten rule between both of us, and the Pakistanis had managed to come in the winters and sit there. And then that's how it all started. The technology per se, there's complete difference. I mean, you had the MiG-29s by then. You had the Mirage 2000 available to us. We had good firepower as well as accurate firepower available to us for Kargil. The technology-wise, I mean, we had leaps and bounds. From 71, we were in Second World War. I think almost Second World War kind of vintage equipment that we were using. We had progressed much high-tech equipment by then. So, and of course, I've written little stories about, still the technology was not as good, like satellite photography was not there. So getting a picture of those guys on top of the hill where they were was most difficult. So a lot of jugaad again was done to film those things, and use of the GPS had just about started. In
Okay.
GPS was there everywhere else, but in the Air Force, just a few aeroplanes had GPS. So
Mhm.
all this started around that time, and of course the Kargil Review Committee did what it did, and recommendations of the committee led to more modernization and more stuff that the armed forces wanted.
So, would you say that there have been more changes between 1999 and 2022 than between 1971 and 1999? Because these are almost equivalent time periods. Would you say that the rate of change of technology and the rate of
Definitely, definitely. The rate of change of technology has been much, much more in the second half. In the second half, that's what my reading is. Yes, having
okay,
flown
so
the aircraft of French make, absolute vintage kinds, to the modern Me-35 upgraded Israeli upgrade Me-35, I saw technology changing in my 36 years. I mean, vastly. And actually, we
mhm.
were outdated ourselves when we went out of the Air Force. We could handle that kind of information flow as well as the equipment also so well as the youngsters could.
Okay. So let's talk about, because most of this is about Air Force officers. I think naturally because you've been talking about this.
Yeah,
So tell us about Colonel Gautam Khote and his story, because I thought it's important also to bring in some army officers
yeah, yeah.
into
In
this
fact, there
into
are
this.
two army stories in this in the Kargil on the Kargil this thing, and there are a few more. That famous story in '71 when he throws that little chit across.
Yes,
Uh,
chit across. Yeah,
that is also
good
army. That's
by
also army. Yeah.
yeah.
So there
But I
are
thought
four of
we'd
us
go into
in the
this one
army.
because we've covered a lot of 71. So tell us about the snow and the shrapnel.
Yeah,
What
the show
story
and the
would you
Sharp
like to
story is actually about Colonel Gautam Khote. Now,
share?
Gautam was posted in Bareilly when I knew him from Bareilly days, and I knew that he was moved overnight to Kargil to fight the
Mhm.
war. And he actually he has 65. He has rescued 65 wounded soldiers um, from the heights of Kargil during his tenure during the war. So, for his bravery, for landing, whenever we land, in fact, in Siachen, whenever we land now also, at some of the posts like Amar, Sonam, and other posts, you can see pock marks appear in the snow. That the Pakistani shelling starts as they hear the helicopter coming in, the information goes and the RT shelling starts. So that was what was happening then too. They used to start firing at the helipad, and the rounds used to fall there. So fortunately the snow was so deep and the ice was so deep inside that the shell used to go inside and burst, and only the spray of snow and ice used to come up. So that's how I've called this chapter, snow and
Yeah, a nice, interesting name. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And Gotham, of course, Tololing battle, those guys were without water. They had fought through the night. The boys, they had lost about 20 guys, I think, they had been killed that night. And
Mhm.
Gotham was tasked to take water to the post, which was still burning. And he landed
Mhm.
on the other side of the hill, a little safer side, on a 2 meter by 2 meter spot. For a layman, 2 meter by 2 meter spot is not big. I may tell you, the helicopter has to be controlled to a spot to touchdown. So that's what he did, and then he took about 100 odd liters of water for the men who had eaten snow that night to clear their parched throats. That was bad enough, actually, leading to other problems.
Okay. There are some questions on the WhatsApp, so I'll just quickly go through them because
Yeah.
it is an open participative thing. So, first of all, it says that would you consider a trilogy on all the three services? And the second question that we've got so far is how do you pick your stories and choose which stories go into a book? Any criterion? So these are
No,
two
I don't.
questions that have come up.
First question. I have three beautiful stories. I must tell you, there's a Pakistani officer who escaped from Pakistan, got arrested from West Pakistan, got arrested in India, and was imprisoned in India, thinking that he was a spy, and then he
Yeah.
had to convince people that he was,
You
and then
talk
he
about
went,
Colonel Sajad Ali.
huh?
Colonel
Yeah,
Sajad?
yeah. Sajad gave me his
Yeah.
story, the internal story of
Yeah, yeah.
how
Colonel
what
Sajad
happened.
is, yeah, Colonel Sajad was there with us last year when we did the
Okay. So
1971 thing. A
yeah,
fascinating story. I mean, I think the
fascinating.
only person who carries a death sentence
Yes, 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 yeah,
from Pakistan, and for all our viewers, he is the person who's got the Padma Shri in India and the Bir Proteek in Bangladesh. So a fantastic story of a subcontinent, story where Pakistan has a death sentence on him, Bangladesh gives him the Bir Proteek, and India gives him the Padma Shri. So he's doing a lot of writing. He's doing a lot of research. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Next story.
एक सजाद सर का story है, and there are two more stories about the carrier, the
Mhm.
carrier, and of course the naval operations in on the eastern front, that is the Bay of Bengal.
Mhm.
Some stories I have which I have not been able to kind of. They were not. I didn't get the complete story actually, so I wanted to get a naval element in my book. But I have a complete set of stories coming up for the next book, which will be something like this only. I am already in touch with people who are giving me the story. I've got a Nat story already, and
Okay, the Nat stories.
the Nat, GNAT,
Okay,
Nat.
DNA. I remember that because there used to be a stamp on the Nat was also featured as a stamp. I
Okay,
don't know whether you are fond of philately or not, but
no, I
in
have
the
not
Nat
tried.
series there was a whole series of stamps which were issued called the Nat series, and I
Okay,
remember collecting these Nat series stamps, and
okay.
there's the image of a Nat, and so I remember this Nat series. Okay,
So
so tell us about this.
I don't really, pick and choose. Whatever I write, I try. I ask my editor which is good and which is bad, and then they tell me that the story is not good enough to go types. So I rely on my editors to help me out about readability.
Okay, okay. So before I come to the next question, there is this very interesting heading that you've given: the rugged and the macho pilots, and you talk here about Group Captain Alok Chauhan. So you can tell us something about him, and then it'll be almost time to to close our session. There are
Yeah,
one or two more questions which I'll ask you. That's from the reader's perspective. So
right,
on this, and then maybe your closing remarks, and then we'll take the last one or two questions.
right, right. So rugged and macho pilots is about the MiG-21s in Kargil.
Hmm.
The MiG-21 pilots are the gung-ho guys. They are a breed apart. The Mirage 2000, the Jaguar pilots, they all have a typical personality profile. When you look at a Jaguar pilot, ये Jaguar pilot है, ये Mirage 2000 pilot है.
Well, incidentally, what are the machines that you have flown?
I have flown all the helicopters in the Air Force,
Hmm.
all of
Okay.
them, except the
And which has
MiG-27.
been your personal favorite? I mean, which is
My
your dream
personal favorite
machine?
would be the cheetah, which flies in the glacier, and the
Okay.
Mi-35 and the Mi-35, the attack helicopter.
Okay. Right. Right. Okay.
So the MiG-21 was used in various roles in the war, and Alok gave me the story of that particular mission actually, where Nachiketa ejected from the MiG-27 during
Mhm.
that sortie, and then of course my dear friend who went in search in the next aircraft MiG-21, he went for the look around for battle damage assessment actually, and he tried to look for Nachiketa there, and he was shot. Ajay Ahuja was his name, and he was not shot actually. He was coming down on the parachute, and when his body was received in Srinagar, it was the doctor said that he was shot at point blank range. So Nachiketa was lucky that he fell into the hands of the Rangers, and there was a captain of the Rangers who rescued him, and he takes him into captivity and takes him for interrogation and all that. And then the diplomatic process and all that starts. So Nachiketa comes back alive, and the guy who's trying to look for him, he falls in the hands of the Mujahids. And the Mujahids shoot him. In fact, what the Pakistani version is that he took out his macro. We carry a very small pistol on our thighs when we fly in war. So in fact, when he's coming down on his parachute, he takes out his macro pistol and tries to shoot at these guys who are waiting for him, who are shooting at him. So nobody knows what actually happened on ground, but his body, when it came back, was badly mutilated, and it was bad. like you said, those ethos and all that thing about 71 and all that. Now this was ruthless. This war was ruthless. There's
No,
so many
obviously, you
stories.
see, because the mujahids are different. I mean, mujahids
Yeah,
are not part of a professional army, right? So there's
that's
a
yeah.
so there is that the thing. Okay, I mean, if we had the time, we could have gone on and on and on. But tell me, what is the state of preparedness of the Indian Air Force and the helicopter units today? If I mean, if there was something that we required to do on the LSE and the LOC.
Oh, I'm out of the Air Force for the last 2 years. One. Secondly, even if I was there, I wouldn't have answered this question straight.
Okay. All
But
right.
but but as a thoroughbred helicopter pilot, I'm very confident and I'm very proud to say that the kind of training that we are doing today and the kind of the aeroplanes that the new aeroplanes that have come, we are good to go on either fronts. And you saw that in Doklam, you saw that in what happened along the Chinese border, what the Air Force could do. And we are way, I'm sorry, there are some articles that I wrote about this on Read about where we as an Air Force stand vis-a-vis the Chinese and all those advantages that we have. So should there be something tomorrow? I think we are a better trained Air Force today thanks to Kargil. Um, a lot of things have happened from Kargil to now.
Thank you very much, Commodore Nitin Sathe. You have really, in the course of this 1 hour, taken us on this wonderful journey of the not just the Air Force but all the defense forces from 1971 to 1999. You've told us stories of wit, of valor. You've told us stories of grit. You also brought in the human aspects to this. We wish you many, many, many more years of writing. We hope
Thank you.
that you can narrate many more stories because it's only by the narration of these stories that we come to realize our own, I mean, the history of our defense forces better. We also realize, what has gone on into the making of this great nation. So, on behalf of all of us at Valley of Words, on behalf of all of us at the National Digital Library of India, Garhwal Post, Fair Observer, Technopack, Green Panel, Coal India, ONGC, and the government of Uttarakhand, I want to thank you. And I hope
Thank you.
that we see you again with the next edition of your book within the next few months in another edition of Afternoons with an Author. So thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Dr. Chopra. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful talking to you always, as always.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
All the
Bye bye.
best.
We are off. It's a live.